Welcome everybody. So thank you very much for coming to the 2023 Spring 2023 Math Stats Career Day. The first one we've held in person in 4 years. I think there's some pent-up demand. So I think, but without further ado, let's just have the panelists introduce themselves in alphabetical last in the mathematical tradition. So Jake, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Jake.
Oh, yeah, just pass the mic, please.
I'm Jake. I graduated in 2011 from the Applied Math program, and today I'm a senior manager at Zoox in software core. So that's the team that builds all the basic stuff for autonomous robots.
So you've gone over to the other side finally.
Yeah, it took a while. So I was the leader in our ChemCost group, and he asked me, hey, are you going to go do that for your living? And I was like, no, management sucks. But it's also a job that needs doing, and I finally decided that it needed doing enough that I would do it.
Right, what's the Batman line? If you live long enough, you become the villain? Yeah, if you live long enough, you become the manager.
Right.
So,
I'm finding ways to have fun.
Yeah. And we'll circle back around for your longer story in a bit. So Thor, next. Thor Kamphefner.
Hi everyone, I graduated from San Jose in 2020. It was an exciting year to graduate. Everything was on fire, although I imagine a lot of you are going through similar things to what I was going through in 2020. So for the last several years, I've been working on various cryptography-related projects. I've worked on a zero-knowledge rollup in the Ethereum space. And more recently, I've been working on a cryptography education project of my own. So looking forward to answering your questions.
All right, thanks, Thor. So next up is Jeff.
Hey guys, I'm Jeffrey. I'm an Actuarial Analyst at State Compensation Insurance Fund. I graduated from San Jose State in 2015 with statistics, and I graduated again in 2018 also with statistics. So, a lot of good to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Cordelia.
Hi everyone, my name is Cordelia. I graduated in 2021 from the Master's Science Mathematics program here at San Jose State. So recently I have been navigating the tech job space, which was kind of messy, but I recently accepted an offer. So I'm excited to talk about what looking for a job now.
Woo, somebody got a job! Yay! Before Judy goes, Valerie Sue was supposed to be here today. We miss her. We miss her not having her. She's a great person, fun person, among other things. But she is feeling ill and has a cough and feeling kind of junky. And it's still the case that you don't want to. It's still the case that you maybe don't want to go like and hang out and breathe on people for 75 minutes if you're in that state. So thanks to Val for offering to help, and it's too bad she can't be here. Get well soon, Val, if you're watching this on YouTube. I don't know why you're watching this on YouTube because you have a job, but anyway. Judy, go ahead.
All right, hi everyone, I'm Judy Garcia. I'm the career counselor for the College of Science. And I'm here today to answer questions about job search, job and internship search. But I can also address things like resumes, the importance of having a LinkedIn profile, really want to emphasize that, and the importance of networking. And I think that's why I'm so glad we have an event like this, because you're going to be able to connect with all these people today. So welcome.
Right. I think the first lesson is everyone should have a LinkedIn page. Is that correct? Yes, everyone should have a LinkedIn page. And so I think, if people are willing, I haven't talked about these folks about this earlier, but if these folks are willing, then maybe they'll accept some of your emails. We'll see. But probably the best, if that's the case, then the best way to do that is probably through LinkedIn. So lesson one, everybody should get a LinkedIn page. All right, so why don't we let's unwind that. Let's just go back up through the names, and so if you could just tell the story about, let's see, how you got either your first job or your current job. So I guess Cordelia, you want to go first here. or you can talk about your current search, which is very exciting, and talk about how, in your, I guess in your previous position, the role that math played in your day-to-day operations.
Okay, so I graduated from San Jose State, as I said, in 2021, and right out of school, I got a job with a late-stage biotech startup as a quality engineer. So if you're not familiar with that title, it's kind of a very statistical heavy role. But in startups, you are not kind of locked into any one role's duties. So I was doing all different kinds of things, whether it was data governance, to machine learning, to just basic analytics, to ad hoc analytic requests, all over the board. So as you all know, it's been layoff season in the tech world. So the company I was with closed their California labs. So myself and all of my Californian colleagues, all of our positions were eliminated. And I found myself in November trying to navigate a very challenging job market. One of the things that I decided to do was, because I didn't know how I felt about continuing on with the volatility of kind of like a startup job, I decided to start applying to government agencies, federal agencies, kind of more established supply chain companies, things like that. Something else that really helped me was something that I learned because I'm very early and new in my career. I found myself at a disadvantage working fully remote as compared to some of my colleagues who had been in the company for a very long time and had existed before like remote work. They just had a better understanding of the company and the product in a way that I, as a remote person, didn't. And so I started, and this isn't for everyone, right? Like remote offers a lot of options for people who have different accessibility needs. But for me, I chose to look for only in-person and hybrid roles. I also found that the competition was a lot less. So I also pivoted to more data science roles, and I did a lot of interviewing and take-homes, and I finally ended up accepting a job offer just last week with a federal agency, and I'm now completing the background check and all of that. But that's kind of like a very generalized overview of what my early career has looked like.
All right. Yay, sure.
Yeah, sorry. I know that's a lot. I don't.
No, that's great. I actually remind me to fill in your form before I forget.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know that if you're wondering who does the background, gets to ask the questions about the background checks, it's us.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have realized that it's still like hybrid and remote work is still very much in demand.
Yeah, so something that, so it was very daunting to me because I don't have a lot of experience, right? I would go to apply for some of these jobs, and I don't want to be overly optimistic, right? It can be really scary. You see a job that's posted an hour ago, and there's 1,600 applicants for some of these remote roles, and it can be really scary. The good news is that we live in the Bay Area, and so we have a significant advantage over folks who may live in, say, Arkansas or something, right? So you have a lot of opportunities, and sometimes you do have to make some sacrifices in your early career, but take whatever you can, including our location, and use that towards your advantage.
So next, Jeffrey.
How we got started on the first job, right?
Yeah,
I'm still on my first job. So when I was in school, one thing I learned, I think, too late, which is one of the reasons I'm here. So I could tell you guys that I learned something too late, so you can learn it now, is Judith, right? Mentioned networking. I did not network. I knew a lot of students, and I had friends at school, but when it came to asking questions about the industry I was interested in, I had no idea who to ask. And in fact, it was because of networking that someone overheard me and said, hey, you want to do actuarial work? I know someone. And that's actually how I got my first foot in the door, is I knew someone who then pointed me to an actuary that I could talk to. So the importance of networking, not just as a, oh, I'm sitting next to this person while you talk, but actually like paying attention to who you can reach out to and ask appropriate questions. I think the important thing is being aware of the resources that you have and knowing how to use that resource, right? One example is networking, people to reach out to, ask questions, figure out what they do and what interests you about it. And a lot of that has to do with spending time to think and reaching out to people that you may not know, or talking to your friends that may have had a similar experience. And the reason that got me where I am at today was because being able to reach out to someone in the industry and network and ask them questions allowed me to then, first of all, have an idea of how I want to approach things. Like, oh, okay, where do I start? And so after talking to the actuary, I was encouraged, I was emboldened. I then looked for, because there wasn't a club at San Jose State at the time, so like literally, again, knowing where resources are available, I Googled Actuarial Club. And I found out that there was a club at Berkeley, and I literally just marched, to Berkeley, marched in, and just like started, going to their club, and I wasn't even a student there. And through that, I was able to network even more, and yes, they allowed me to go because they were encouraged to have someone else come in to participate as well. So like, that's what I mean by, first, I didn't even know to reach out to people. Second, I didn't know there was a club at Berkeley until someone pointed it out or until I Googled it. And then third, it's just knowing about what industry you're getting into so that when you do start practicing for interviews, you can then at least have something to talk about. And so that brings me to my second point is how I got to my current position is I practiced for interviews, I worked up my resume, and I thought about why I wanted to be in the industry that I'm currently in. And one example I like to think about is I've made probably more than one of my professors facepalm when I showed them my first draft. Dr. Bremer was that person. She facepalmed. She's like, Jeff, why would you write this? But my point is, work up your interviewing, get your resumes checked out by students who don't know the industry, by people, if you have the opportunity, people who are in the industry, by professors who see all these people get churned through, and people who are graduates or alumni who are working in the industry. So these are also some practical steps. How I specifically got into this position was when I graduated, I came back for a master's degree because I think the professors here are cool. And also, it gave me time to network while I was in school. So while I was networking, I realized that it's a lot easier to just network for the purposes of learning and understanding more about what the industry is about, what makes the analysts enjoy what they do. And that way, I don't have an expectation of, oh, I went to this networking, I must now have a job offer. It's just about making connections, and that's literally what networking is. And so, in one instance where I just went and I spoke with someone, and it's just a matter of, if you're interested, show that interest, right? Hey, my name is Jeffrey, I'm a college student. I'm wondering if you know anyone who's hiring an intern. And sometimes the answer is, yes, I'm hiring an intern, give me your resume. Sometimes it's your friend who you networked with, and there's a networking keyword again, right? Who says, hey, I know someone who's hiring, are you interested? Or someone could even say, hey, we're not looking to hire students from your school, but if you show that interest, you could still say, hey, I know you're not gonna hire from my school, I'm gonna apply anyway. And here's the kicker, I got that internship. Right, so internship project, showing initiative, networking, building up that confidence, and reaching out to people, learning what the industry is about before I got into the industry, I think that helped me land my first job. Because by the time I interviewed and became an intern, I had 2 internships. By the time I got my second internship, which then transferred into a full-time, I already thought, okay, this is something that I definitely do want to do. and I'm comfortable enough to talk to people and ask questions. And yeah, so which brings me to the third point, ask questions. Be curious. If you're not curious about something, then maybe you either have found out or you're just not that interested. So that's something to think about too. So network, practice your resumes, practice your interviews, work up your confidence, whatever that looks like to you, and reach out to people and do your research, show initiative, and that's how I got my first job, and I'm still there. So it's only been 4 years or so. That's how I got it. That wraps it up for me.
All right. I'm reminded of the old joke, the ancient joke where there's a tourist lost and wandering in New York, comes across a famous violinist. Says, famous violinist, how to get to Carnegie Hall? And the violinist says, practice, practice, practice. So, never mind. It'd be funny if you were like over 60. Anyway, so next up is Thor. And Thor, you're in a very different culture than the folks who usually get here. So I'm really curious to see what your story is, what your origin story is, so to speak.
With pleasure. So I suppose a lot of you have a pretty serious deal of uncertainty about sort of what the next step is going to be for you. You're sort of at the transition point, and you can kind of see like, well, I'm going to do something different soon. And not entirely sure what that's going to be, but it's going to be different, right? And so like what my sort of advice here is that you have a great deal of uncertainty. And the sort of first question to answer is, well, what is like some idea about like the thing that you actually think that you're going to want to work on? Like what interests you? Because the most valuable thing with sort of getting that first job is sort of a project, whether it's a Kamphefner project or an internship or just something that you built on by yourself over the summer. I've been guiding a full stack developer through building her own Spotify website so that she can work in the music industry because that's sort of what she's into. These sorts of projects really help define you as an applicant to the projects that are going to sort of look for a job at. And if you don't necessarily know that like this project is the one for me, I'm going to be there for forever, that's fine. I stayed at my first job less than a year. I stayed at my second job for a little bit more than a year, and I'm now working on my own sort of project that's grant supported. It's okay not to know everything, and it's okay not to have like the next handlebar be obvious, but what sort of helps guide you through that period of uncertainty is, I know what I'm sort of interested in, and I'm going to find a way to work on that just a little bit, hopefully every day, or at least pushing that sort of ball forward so that when it comes time for you to say, I would like to work on this more and get paid for it, and they ask, well, what do you do? Like, well, I did this cool thing. We can talk about that cool thing, and that's a really good way to once you get to the interview. Like, the next question is like, why do I like you? Well, that person is trying to like you. They're trying to see you working with them, and that's your opportunity to win them over with the story of this cool thing that you worked on. So it can feel uncertain what cool thing is worth working on, but you have other people in this room with you that are also sort of trying to answer that question for themselves. So don't feel like you need to work on it alone. As for my own story, basically, I was sort of interested in working specifically in how I think cryptocurrency offers sort of a much more constrained environment for the types of interesting problems to solve. Cryptography has a lot of sort of interesting answers to the problems that come up in those constrained distributed computing environments. And I was sort of interested in particularly zero-knowledge solutions because they're sort of cutting edge. A lot of this sort of technology is moving very quickly, and I sort of like to feel like I'm doing something that's sort of moving very fast. And there's a sort of combination of research and engineering effort that's sort of working together to solve a problem. So I had to learn a lot of new skills, stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to learn in a classroom. I was able to do that because the things that I was interested in working on were, well, I was interested in them. And I could sort of work on projects and sort of get myself out of bed in the morning and to go do that. That was great. So if the thing that you're interested in, you can sort of see it over there, there's not an obvious path. Like Jeffrey mentioned, like sometimes a bit of networking can help you understand sort of how you might get there. And it's not obvious who you might network with to sort of get to the thing that you're trying to get to? Well, I mean, ask around. Everyone's trying to figure that out for themselves. It's a very useful thing to know that you're all trying to help each other in some aspect. And so you all have things that you can offer one another and that you can offer potential employers. So keep that in mind as you're sort of trying to answer this problem. Thanks for listening to my word salad.
Right. So, before we get away from Thor, I'm just really curious because, so just to get really specific, what was your first job?
Oh, my first job, I was working as a cryptographic engineer at a ZK rollup called Matter Labs.
What is a ZK rollup?
Oh, okay. So the whole,
Is that like a fruit rollup?
yeah, it's actually quite almost, you just swap the fruit out and put some letters in it. You eat the letters. So the premise there is that basically the whole scheme with blockchains is that everyone re-executes the state transition. So each block is a state transition. Zero knowledge is a branch of technology, or a branch of cryptography that sort of studies the question. If I want to bind some computer to say, I computed this algorithm honestly and correctly, and I can give you suppose that computation took 1,000 steps, I can give you a 20-step proof that I computed this thing validly. So you can use that sort of technique to say, instead of everyone computing the state, one computer computes the state and everyone else verifies it succinctly. So it's a sort of way of scaling that computation.
I just have like a way more mundane, like non-mathematical, like, did you have a boss?
Yes.
Did you talk to a person? Like, how did you?
Oh,
Did they
yeah.
pay you? Did they pay you in crypto? Actually,
So,
did they give you money for this job? Like,
Yeah,
you know, like,
yeah,
like
I
what are
got-
the mechanics of this?
I was paid in euros precisely, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. So how did you get into the position where someone was going to write you a paycheck
right.
and like have you type things?
Back to that. So actually, a useful thing I was talking about the value of projects. So I worked on a Kamphefner project with Dr. Yan Zhang, and that sort of gave me a strong foot in the door.
Yeah. So this, has everybody here worked on campus? Oh, you missed out. Yeah, sorry. All right. Yeah. Anyway, it's a great thing, and it's not a coincidence that they all have jobs. Okay, but continue, please. So you're working on the crypto campus project.
Yeah. So we were working on a Kamphefner project related to the Ethereum 2 consensus protocol, and that sort of gave me a lot of experience in the industry that sort of got me interested, and gave me exposure to that industry, and proved to me that I actually was interested in it. So I suppose that's sort of the value of projects like internships and camp costs. But even if you aren't able to get those internships and camp costs, there's no reason you can't attend a conference. When I was in my last semester of school, I attended a crypto conference just to see if I would like it. I did. I met a lot of people there, and it was sort of a useful experience for me to get a sense that I probably like working in this industry, and it also gave me an opportunity to network with people that were already doing it. So.
But I'm sorry, I just have these so many naive questions because the other folks here who have been here before, I'm just kind of used to how there's like a job ad, you answer the job ad, you go in the interview. Or like, what did you? Was there an ad? Was it on Craigslist? Did you put a tooth under the pillow for the crypto fairy? Like, what? How did you get this job?
Okay, so the Crypto Fairies is a different project. I didn't work on that one. So I kind of knew the shape of the problems that I was interested in. I think that in particular when we're talking about cryptocurrency, there's a lot of bullshit, right? It's sort of like, I think the thing that everyone acknowledges is that there's a ton of projects that aren't doing anything interesting, and they're sort of there to accumulate. So the question is, like, especially in a sort of frothy industry, crypto is not an example of a frothy industry, but especially in a frothy industry, the sort of question is, can you develop a sort of sense of what's bullshit and what's not?
Well, we'll take that out on post later.
What's nonsense and what seems interesting, and sometimes those things intersect, but oftentimes the sort of test of you as a sort of scientist or engineer is your capacity to say, I have some things that I believe, and they don't stand in contradiction to this interesting thing, so that thing might be worth working on. That's sort of how I felt about zero knowledge rollups.
But to whom did you say these things? Like, in what setting? Did you like run into them in the street, or like, did you like tweet something and they DM'd you, or?
Actually, I'm pretty sure I just applied to that job application cold. I failed my first job interview because I didn't actually remember how to implement a linked list. But then they asked me how to implement a linked list, and I was like, oh, I'll have to think about that, but this is my fun. If you fail your first interviews, don't be worried about it. I mean, you'll have another shot. Keep practicing, keep studying, and sometimes they'll ask you the same dumb question that you got in the first interview.
Okay, so even in a sort of like, kind of somewhat mystical and unusual seeming sector, the actual interview and application process was pretty conventional.
Yeah, I applied through there. I mean, so a lot of, basically if you're interested in a particular industry, a lot of this you can do is you can go to a venture capitalist's page who invests in that industry. They'll probably have a whole listing of portfolio companies who have job openings in that industry. So that's a strategy that you might take if you're kind of trying to move into a particular industry. But since then, it's been more conventional that I've been able to find new things to work on through my network. So as Jeffrey mentioned, it can be quite useful for you to say, okay, I go to a conference or a meetup in my city about the topic that I'm interested in. And if you're thinking about switching jobs, then that's a really great sort of avenue to sort of explore what's out there. And for me, I mean, I have a kind of handful of projects that I sort of know because I know people who work at them. And if I would like to go take a job at any of those companies, I could go talk to that person and say, hey, are you hiring for this role? And in startups in particular, as Cordelia mentioned, if you go work at a startup and you find out like, okay, I liked it up till here, and then maybe it's a little bit rough through here, and actually now I think I'd rather leave. It tends to be easier to get find a job at a startup because like they're, fairly risky propositions. You go work at a more sort of institutional place, they probably have a longer interview process. But it also means that a sort of startup, like things like networking matter even more at startups because they're sort of like looking to see, do you fit with the sort of vibe the startup already has. It's often a thing. Culture fit is usually fairly strong with the right startups. So those are things to consider.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds very helpful. All right, so finally, Jake, sorry.
All right, so I'll do my first job story, lead that actually into my current job story because it fits nicely. By the way, this is a really strong panel. All of you have really great advice, and I'm going to mirror a lot of it, so a lot of this isn't going to be new now. But anyways, in 2009, when I started looking for internships while I was at San Jose State, it was on the heels of the 2008 financial crisis. Similar-ish situation in tech to what we're dealing with now. So I had to get creative because a lot of the companies, even when I went to the career day and learned about sport vision from, I forget her name now.
Oh, Alina.
Alina, that's right. They offered to take my resume and consider me for an internship, and then they turned around and changed their mind because the financial crisis was affecting more and more parts of the industry, and they were pretty scared. So what I chose to do was go to conferences, but I couldn't afford to go to a lot of conferences because they weren't free. And so I opted to volunteer at those conferences, to give people badges as they would go in. So then you get in for free. And what's even better is not only do you get to learn from the conference discussions, but you get free lunch and you get to sit with people who are at the conference who are looking to network in their industry. So also what happened in 2009 is I saw the DARPA Grand Challenge documentary video that Stanford University and Volkswagen Labs jointly won back in 2005. Turned out that team at Volkswagen and Stanford kept that project going. And one of the members of that team on the Volkswagen side was at one of the conferences I went to, and at one of the tables I sat at. And so I was able to talk to him about that experience and how that documentary got me interested in focusing on computer vision. And of the cards that I got, business cards that I got at that lunch, that's the one that ran in the internship. And in my second month at that internship, someone piped up and said, hey, we're going over to Stanford to meet with the team. Who wants to come? And I was like, oh, I want to come. So I went to that meeting during which Jesse Levinson, now the CTO of Zoox, gave a presentation on how they failed to get traffic light state detection into the ICRA conference that year, and they needed help. And I said, does anyone have time to help? I said, I have time to help, and I didn't have time to help. I let my grades slip a little bit that semester in exchange for the time necessary to figure out everything I had to figure out in order to actually help on this project, which was a whole lot of Linux, a whole lot of C++ that I didn't know. I knew C++, but not nearly as deep as necessary for this project. And a whole lot of computer vision that I had only so far learned through a side project that I'd done over the previous summer with Alex Tsui, where we decided to look for tennis balls in arbitrary video. So it turned out that project had direct implications on finding traffic lights because they're both round.
And sometimes yellow.
Yeah, and very infrequently yellow, it turns out. You have to collect a lot of data to get enough yellow traffic lights to train any algorithms on. And anyways, that springboarded my whole career, because then not only did I have an internship that was relevant to the experience I wanted to have, but I ended up co-authoring a paper with a Stanford graduate student who was getting his PhD. And that paper became, for a very short time, seminal in the topic of traffic light state detection. So then I took a couple of other jobs after Volkswagen, but when Jesse and Tim started Zoox, lo and behold, they asked if I wanted to join, and they were so new, and I had that little guy.
Yeah, he's all over the place.
And so I was like, I can't take that much risk right now, but a year later I said, okay, we're still here. Maybe it's not quite as risky. So yeah, the moral is, in especially this economy, you need to do the networking because that's the only way you're going to get the job. In fact, I can talk more about that unless we want to talk about that later. But as a hiring manager, I have a lot of knowledge about just how difficult it's going to be to get a job the normal way right now.
Is Zoox hiring?
We are. We are among the few companies in this space that is actually doing well and trying to expand. But in that same sentiment is that all those other companies that are competing with us, they're laying off the people we want to hire. And so those are our first choice every time. And then even if you were to be impressive in that set of people, you're still going to be just graduating, which means that we're only going to hire you if you have an internship with us first. Because we don't hire fresh graduates except through the internship program. But if you manage to get the